Welcome to learning more about sustainability at work with the team across Watson Farley Williams. My name is Jo Hand. I'm one of the co-founders of Geeky, and we've been working with your teams for a couple of years, really focusing on lots of different actions and initiatives that we can all take personally to play a role, have a positive impact on the planet. And today we are going to talk specifically about what we can do in the workplace. And for those of you who don't know Geeky, so we're a B Corporation and also social enterprise, and our mission is to help people play a positive role when it comes to sustainability. And we work with a really broad range of companies to work with their employees in this area, and we also work closely with the UN Race to Zero. But everything that's behind all of the information that we present to you is very much science-based, and our methodology is all on the website if you want to dig into it. So we're going to cover today just the kind of big picture in terms of why sustainability in the workplace really matters, and then looking at what we can all do, the role that we can all play individually, and the challenge that is coming up next week. This is to get everybody set for it, to let you know what to expect, and most importantly, how to get involved. But we wanted to just start with a little poll, which Emily is going to launch in terms of awareness around the sustainability goals at Watson Farley Williams. So please do submit any responses that you have on this poll. And while you're doing that, I'm going to talk about why this really matters. So you can see here what we need to do from a carbon emissions perspective globally to really keep temperature rise under control. And you can see that we need to halve emissions this decade. Now, some of you might have heard that the 2020s, this decade that we're in, described as the decisive decade because of that need to halve emissions globally. Now, clearly, this will come from every component of society. From policy, that's crucial, the role of business is crucial, and also the role that we can play as individuals is really important as well. But there's also an increasing business need around this, and we're seeing much more regulation and pressure from customers as well for companies to take action around sustainability, to report on their emissions, but also increasingly to report on having carbon reduction plans in place as well. And we're seeing that growing in tenders and RFPs and that kind of thing. So there's a planetary imperative, but also increasingly the business imperative as well. So before we got into the kind of more detail on what we can do, I just wanted to share with you a story. It was around 2006, 2007, before there was really any awareness around the importance of the supply chain when it comes to carbon emissions and sustainability. But there was an awareness within Walmart, the big US retail company, that they wanted to reduce their carbon emissions. And an intern there came up with the idea of, well, we need to talk to our suppliers. Most of our emissions are coming from our supply chain. So let's get those guys involved to really start to mobilize beyond our direct operations. Now, this single idea from this intern has now grown into this global initiative. It started with the Carbon Disclosure Project, which is a big carbon reporting platform used by most of the big companies all around the world to report back to their investors and other stakeholders. And out of this, now hundreds of companies all over the world use the Carbon Disclosure Project to measure and report their supply chain or suppliers' emissions, but also it's become a really important part of carbon emissions management, focusing on suppliers, and in no small part thanks to the idea that this one intern had. So I just wanted to tell this story really just to highlight how whoever we are, whatever level of seniority we are, everyone can have a positive impact. So with that in mind, that we can all play a really positive role, I just wanted to give a little summary of greenhouse gas emissions in terms of companies and what they actually look like from a company perspective. So there are three areas, and this is I'm going to keep it very kind of high level, but just to help explain what I'm going to go into in further detail later on. There's something called Scope 1, which is effectively direct emissions. So that's broadly speaking when a company buys fossil fuels and burns them. So a factory, using fuel to fire its factories, but also if a company owns vehicles, the fuel that would go in those vehicles, or if a company owns boilers, the fuel that would go in those boilers, for example. That's all Scope 1. Scope 2 is largely electricity. So for Watson Farley, that would be definitely a component of the Watson Farley Williams emissions, because of all the electricity that's purchased to power for use in offices. And then the third part, which is often the largest, is what's called Scope 3. That's basically everything else. So everything from supply chain emissions, business travel, waste, purchased goods and services in all their form, contractors, but also then use of products, advice advice provided to clients, distribution, really all the other components of business operations, which will have a carbon associated emissions with them. So that everything else bucket is typically by far the largest part and also the most complex to manage, but also an area where as employees we can actually really play an influence. And I wanted to just talk about that, just highlight the three areas that we're going to talk about today, all of which, well, actually the first two certainly sit within that Scope 3, everything else bucket. The energy piece is more of the energy use at work, so that's more of the electricity component, but it's about the actions that we can do in the workplace, the actions that we can do at home when we're working from home, and also energy use as well. So if we look at the working from home area to get started with, so some of the key areas to consider here are, firstly, just thinking about our own individual situation, and it does vary massively. If you live in a modern, well-insulated flat in an urban area and you use public transport to get to work, or you work from home most of the time, and you don't have massive energy requirements to keep the flat warm because it's well insulated and not too big, that would be very different from somebody who might live in a old drafty house with those sash windows that the wind goes whistling through, if you're in the UK, or an area that's just not, that doesn't have good insulation, so you're much more dependent on higher energy usage just to keep the house warm. These are all different factors, and it's about working out what your own individual situation is, and also if you are able to use renewable electricity at home, and I know in some countries that's much easier to access than others, but if it's possible, that can be a really big influencer in terms of your working from home emissions, and emissions beyond working from home, living at all of your usage at home. And then also just thinking about things like how warm you keep the house. So for example, or how cold if you're in a hot country. So just changing the thermostat by 1 degree can actually make a really significant difference to our energy usage, both with air conditioning but also with heating systems as well. So if we just notch in cold countries during the winter, notch the thermostat down by 1 degree, so you're heating a little bit less, that can save 10 to 20% on your energy usage, which over a year can be quite significant in terms of cost savings, which is good, but also in terms of emissions, and those emissions when you're working from home are actually associated with the company carbon footprint. So that's definitely something to have a think about. And we've also got a working from home checklist as well, which I'm going to share. Emily's going to share that with you in the chat. But I think all of these, it's really thinking about what our own individual situation is, how much fossil fuels we're using, and the heating and cooling that we have in our homes. And thinking about, do I need to heat the whole house, or can I just heat a small part of it if I'm just using one room to work in, for example. So we've got the working from home checklist, which is a really super simple, just go in and look through and think about it. It's got some quite nice things just to think about in terms of changes that we can make and reduce energy usage at home, which is also good for our bills as well. And thinking about paper use as well, which I think is much more on everybody's radar now than it used to be. But not printing if we don't need to, both at home and at work, has cost and environmental benefits as well. So all of these links that we've just dropped in the chat, you can just click straight through on them and find out more about them. And if you take those steps as part of the challenge, then that is all good for helping you get up the leaderboard as well, which is starting next week. So working from home, definitely one area that we can really think about having a positive impact on. Now, waste at work is another area that I think is we notice it because it's often there in front of us at lunch times when the bins in the office are kind of spilling out with lunchtime takeout food. But there's all sorts of different impacts from a waste perspective at work. It very much depends on the company. It's not usually the largest part of a company's emissions, but it's certainly an important part that as employees everybody can have an influence. If everything from coffee cups to takeouts for lunch through to actually just the day-to-day in the workplace of being mindful of how much paper you use or how much energy you use. I think often in the workplace there's a sort of tendency to think a little bit less about waste than we might do in the home. And as you can see from this stat, waste collectively has a really big impact because you have all of the environmental inputs and the carbon emissions associated with the creation of whatever the product or service is that we're wasting. But then if it's a product that ends up in landfill, when it actually goes into landfill, the decomposition process releases methane, which is a really potent greenhouse gas. So obviously less waste means less methane. Now, one of the sort of very common lightning rod topics around waste in the office is the recycling bins, and I think they often cause a lot of kind of confusion and sometimes a bit of worry because people feel they don't know what to put into which pot or which bin, and can food packaging be recycled if it's got remnants of food on it. So I think as a result, there's often, as you can see from this stat, often the wrong things go into the wrong bins. So it's definitely worth just taking a bit of time to check out the recycling bins in your office and work out what goes in what bin. And telling any colleagues, I'm always really struck by how it is one of those topics that gets a lot of attention and a lot of concern in many offices. So I think probably the first thing to think about is just working out what you can reduce in terms of waste and what's possible to recycle. And then thinking across all of the areas of work, really, from food and drink, coffee cups, for example, swapping to a reusable coffee cup rather than a single-use one. Same with food. If it's possible to use reusable food containers or china and cutlery rather than paper or plastic containers that get thrown out. That can also be good. But also thinking about IT waste, and we can talk about that in a bit more detail later. But that's something that is definitely one to think about. And the good thing about reducing waste is it usually reduces costs as well. which is always good. So we've got a few more steps here that will link straight through to your Geeky Zero platform, which you can use if you want to go and check them out, and we'll share them in the email follow-ups as well that will go out shortly. But just learning about recycling at work, avoiding food waste is always a good one. In the UK, we throw out, the average household throws out around 80 kilos of edible food every year, and that's about the average weight of a grown adult. So a lot of food waste there. So just being more mindful of food that we bring in, and or indeed that we eat at home for work, and reducing that waste wherever we can. And the reusable coffee cup, so only about 1 in 400 plastic or paper coffee cups actually gets recycled. Most of the time they end up in landfills. So we can, if you think of all of the coffee cups that you know, in nations of coffee drinkers all over the world that we consume, swapping those out to a reusable cup can have a really significant reduction in waste there too. Now that so we touched on working at home. We've touched on waste. Another area that we can all have an influence over is saving energy at work. And I think often when we have those meeting rooms, for example, with the big screens in, it's so common to forget to turn them off, or thinking that somebody else will turn them off. So there's so many sources of energy that are used all over the office. It's just starting to be a bit more mindful about them, and whether you can switch off if possible. And the big annual climate conferences that take place at the end of each year. There was the one that took place in 2023 in the United Arab Emirates, which was called COP28. One of the key priority areas, one of the low-hanging fruit, effectively, that the international community identified as a big priority was energy efficiency, to really reduce emissions as quickly as possible. So it's really about getting exactly the same output, but in just a more efficient way, and reducing waste as a result. And you can see from this figure how significant that can be globally, or indeed within a company. So here are some of the areas that we can think about. Energy savings is effectively just reducing the amount of energy that we use. So maybe doing something differently or not doing it. Energy efficiency is about using less energy to achieve the same outcome. So really obvious one is LED light bulbs, rather than other more energy intensive light bulbs, which create a lot of waste heat, and as a result use more energy. But switching to LEDs, you get exactly the same experience, but for a lot less energy use. And just starting a simple energy saving checklist. So we've actually got a step around that as well that we're just going to drop in the chat. So definitely worth just doing a little checklist of all of the areas that there's the potential to save energy in. And sometimes, quite surprising, some of them, but it's just about working out where there is that potential, and being a bit more mindful about it, looking at our energy use through that lens. For the first time can be quite surprising, and mean that we do things slightly differently. But all of these steps, if you just click through on them, and you'll be able to see take the stairs, obviously totally depends on what the office setup is. But if wherever that's possible, also good for a bit of getting the heart rate going as well. If you're able to do that's a surprisingly popular one, rather than taking the lift. And devices in our homes and in the office, even when they're on standby, they are still using a bit of energy, and we can just reduce that usage just by turning them off at the end of each session as well. So we thought it would be interesting just to hear whether you guys would be keen to do more around Watson Farley Williams sustainability goals, and just working out whether you guys are up for that. So while you are answering that, we'll also ask you what would make it easier to, because I think we often find that that lots of people would really like to do more, and it's just actually working out how to do more in the most efficient way. So it'd be great to hear from you what if there are any barriers around this, you know, what kind of things get in the way. And I can share with you shortly what some of those barriers are. But while you're answering, yeah, we often find that time and knowledge actually are often big ones, and also priorities, because life is very busy. So thank you for answering them. So I just wanted to finish, having just talked very briefly really about those three areas. Taking part in the challenge that we're running together next week, how to get involved, and why, you know, what the benefits are of getting involved. So much of it's just about learning and finding out new activities and new ways to participate and to play a positive role in the workplace around supporting Watson Farley Williams sustainability goals, and coming together as a team, and some good healthy competition as well. I think there are some prizes in the pipeline, and all of the steps that you commit to or that you complete will then help you in the leaderboard position, which is on your Geeky Zero platform, which you can either sign up to, or if you've already got an account, then just sign back in. You'll see that the challenge is coming soon, so starting officially next week. But if you decide that you want to take any actions in this week, then that will also count. So there are lots of recommended steps at the top around sustainability at work, which will cover some of the areas that we've covered are in there, but there are also some other additional areas as well that you might want to find out about. And the more steps you take, the higher you get up the leaderboard. And we often get asked, you know, what should I do? How many should I take? We're all different, and it's about actually working out what's right for you. But we often find that people like to take 2 or 3 to get started, and then tick them off during the week to again help boost that position, because when you complete a step, it gives you further points. And of course, spreading the word and sharing what you're doing with colleagues is a really important part of encouraging positive activity across the firm. You know, helping people understand why this matters, why it's important to the business, and how everybody can get involved and everybody can have a really positive impact as well. So I definitely encourage you to share with any colleagues who are interested in this area, or indeed you know, colleagues who haven't thought about it before, because often it's a new area for some people, and actually just helping people understand that it's not this big topic that's so far away from us all. Actually helping people understand that we can all play a positive role, and we can all do our bit. And there are also often lots of additional benefits, like saving money, saving time, you know, getting that heart rate up by going up the stairs. Lots of different ways to reap the benefits above and beyond doing our bit to help the planet. So thank you for joining. I'm not sure that we have any questions coming in on the chat, but if we do, I'd be really happy to answer them. Oh, we do have one from, I think I had a hand raised. Amal, can we? I'm not sure if we can unmute you. If not, we can drop some questions in the chat. Oh, no, not a question. Well, I think I'm going to say thank you all so much for joining, and really urge you to get involved from next week. And it's a great way just to start thinking about all of the different areas of work where we can have a positive impact in terms of the environment, but also there's often a really close association with efficiency and lots of positive outcomes as well, and often saving money as well, particularly those working from home actions. So really good for reducing our energy bills as well. So thank you all very much for joining, and good luck with the challenge. And we'll share you lots of updates via email during the week next week. So all kicking off on the 31st of March, next Monday. So mark that in your diary as a time to go in and get started on Geeky Zero. But you can sign up now or select your steps already if you can't wait till then. Thank you so much.